Hi, I'm Ian Carpenter with Live1.tv here in New York. I'm here with my guest, Fátimazöhra Nouinou. She is a candidate in the next mayoral election. Welcome to Live1.tv, Fátimazöhra.
Thank you, Mr. Ian.
Yeah.
I am thrilled to be here. I thank you so much for inviting me for this interview. It's going to be my first interview as a candidate for mayor of New York City.
Great. Why don't you tell us a bit about yourself, and then we can get into your platform and questions.
Of course. I am a former United Nations employee for about 2 decades here in New York City and in peacekeeping missions. I have been in New York since January 2001. I am a real New Yorker, even though I have been traveling to other countries, and I have been in UN peacekeeping missions overseas. Now I'm a United States citizen, proudly a United States citizen. So my life has been quite different because when I first came to New York City, I came with my American dream as everybody. And just my chance that I am ambitious, I ended up working in the United Nations. I could have ended up working in any other sector.
Right.
So when I joined the UN, my American dream was a kind of kept in a box. So I have been living in New York City for years, only sharing the supermarkets, the subways, and the other public areas with New Yorkers. I haven't been interacting with New York City government officers or agencies.
Right.
So the moment I married my husband, who is a born United States citizen, I started interacting with the government.
Yeah.
At that time, I started opening my eyes to the reality of how New York City functions, until I became a permanent resident and then a United States citizen.
Okay.
So,
I'd like to tell.
Yeah, sure.
I'd like to tell the viewers. You worked for a couple of decades at the United Nations in many different departments.
Sure.
You
Yes.
spent time in the communications department, the aviation department, investigations, administration of justice, and counterterrorism. And you also spent time on the 38th floor at the United Nations in the executive office of the Secretary General. So you're coming qualified to be able to run for mayor. So tell us how that experience you feel will help you in a position of mayor of New York.
Well, thank you for mentioning that. Humbly, yes, I feel qualified because of my international background. I believe, and many people believe, especially New Yorkers, that New York City is not any city. It's an international city, the most metropolitan city, the most diplomatic city, the most political, even though it's not Washington, D.C., but we have the United Nations and we have United Nations agencies. We have the whole world coming here. And also it's famous for its fashion, for its art, for its culture, for its tourism. So holding this international background and having lived in other countries and other continents, I believe I have the skills and the capacity and the experience to lead this city. It doesn't mean that I can do it on my own. I need really a great, competent team that I'm trying actually to bring together.
Where do we begin? So much is happening constantly in New York. It seems even more with what's coming out of the Trump administration with DOGE and the Elon Musk, the biggest audit that's ever happened in the history of the world, they're calling it. And this audit is going to affect New York, but there's been such a fast news cycle, it's been hard to keep up. Why don't you choose some topics that you'd like to talk about that are important for our listeners and viewers to hear?
Well, one of the things I want to let my viewers know is that I am against corruption. And I have already been a whistleblower of the United Nations corruption. First of all, people don't know me. I have to tell them who I am. After spending about 20 decades in the United Nations, I've already campaigned to become the United Nations Secretary General in 2021. Sadly, the UN organization is completely corrupt. It needs reform, a complete reform in different aspects, as a whole. When I served the UN, I was a foreigner. I was not a United States citizen. So now, becoming a United States citizen, my city and my country have priority. Because when I worked at the UN, many New Yorkers have no idea how the UN functions. I have been living in front of the United Nations, and my neighbors had no idea what the UN means. So there is no outreach from the UN to New Yorkers and to the Americans. Right. And also, the New Yorkers don't know that the UN became corrupt because we allowed that to happen. We have corruption in our city governments or city agencies. Because some federal government officials say that we don't have New York City government, we have New York City agencies. That's what we call them, because the government is the federal government. I've just heard it like randomly. It's not like an official statement. Whatever it is called, we have corruption locally, on a state level, and on a federal level. With that, we are allowing the United Nations to be corrupt. And also something else. As a foreigner serving in the United Nations in New York, with many others, we consider New York to be the base of peace, justice, gender equality, rule of law, everything. The UN doesn't have a constitution, doesn't have a rule of law. However, it should be enforcing the law in other countries. Unfortunately, it's not what is happening. So my priority as a former UN employee for about 20 years, and having the experience of the UN, I would know how to implement a rule of law in my city that hosts the UN. So this way, we can help the UN to reduce its corruption activities, or corrupt activities, or corruption standards. So our government doesn't know that we have, they may know, they may not know, diplomats who come to the United States. I don't know about the federal level governments. I don't know about what's going on in Washington, D.C. I've been only on a visit. I've never lived there. I've never worked in any governments on this planet. But working in United Nations, I have dealt with work that is handled by other governments. So I have an idea about governance. So the UN hosts diplomats who get a diplomatic visa. That diplomatic visa doesn't require a background check for most of them. So we have people coming to work in the UN, mostly the delegates who are representing their own countries, who have had no background check by our State Department. So we don't know who they are. So during my last decade in the United Nations, after accumulating 10 experience, I started being scared because especially that I worked in the United Nations investigation. So that department where I worked is called OIOS, which is the Office of Internal Oversight Services of the UN. It means that office has been established in order to investigate all the wrongdoing in the United Nations. Even if the Secretary General is doing wrongdoing, that office is able, according to its mandate, to investigate him or her. So sadly, this is not happening, and unfortunately, it's not happening. The UN cannot judge itself, cannot rule itself, and cannot oversee itself. Because that independent office that has been established in the UN hasn't been working in parallel with the what is outlined on its mandates. So it became like under the ruling of the United Nations. So there is a lot of cover-up. So now, to do my part as a United States citizen, I'm running my campaign as a candidate for a New York City mayor in order to fix my city, to see it really clean, safe, and modern again. Because right now, we are all American. I'm talking about my network. Most of my network, we are immigrants. So why do immigrants come here to New York? We come because we run away from corruption, we run away from political persecution, we run away from injustice, we run away from gender inequality. So right now, it's all happening here in New York City. It doesn't make sense. I have the obligation to do something. Because when I took the oath to become a United States citizen, I took the oath to contribute to democracy. And right now we are losing democracy in the United States. I fear that. So I'm trying to do my best. I may not win, but I will try to spread the word, to say who I am, what I can do, and I am waiting for help from all New Yorkers during my campaign, whether as volunteers or as aid workers, until I receive some contributions. Then I will be paying my campaign staff, if God permits.
This is very exciting to hear. You're running a very dynamic, energetic campaign already.
Thank you
for
saying that.
It's
a compliment. Thank you so much.
That
means a lot to me.
I mean it. And I do have a lot of questions for you, but I feel like getting to one, just like now I'm excited to hear what happens within the first few days of a Nouinou mayoral position. If you get the position of mayor, what happens within the first few days of you taking office?
Oh, sure. Before I answer that, there is something missing from the prior question about the DOJ.
Okay.
Yes,
I
try to be attentive to details. So,
sure.
Yes, all what I know is that nobody is above the law.
Oh, you mean we're talking about the UN and the DOJ?
DOJ,
I know, there was so much there
We
as
ended
well.
up talking about the UN because I wanted to let people know
please.
how the UN
There
functions
are tremendous
briefly.
problems at the United Nations, and I've been reading about them for years. The diplomatic immunity that delegates get, they sometimes are involved in awful crimes, and pretty much they
crimes
just...
against humanity.
Humanity, and they're able to just get away from it and without any...
We shouldn't allow that to happen. Excuse me. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Yes, so you finish your question first.
So, there is rampant problems at the United Nations, and with your experience, you're bringing attention to that. The UN is such an influential institution in New York on First Avenue between 42nd and 47th Street. And with the Security Council there and all the different missions around the area, it's very important in this city. So it's great to hear that you're putting attention on it. Was there something else that you were going to speak about the UN before we go on to other topics?
Absolutely, very briefly. Part of my agenda, or as an element in my policy, is to increase law enforcement. When I say that, I'm talking about intelligence in New York City. So we need the presence of a more focus of FBI, CIA, and NSA in New York City because of the presence of 193 member states here. So we have consulates and permanent missions to the UN. So each country, 193 countries, they have embassies are in Washington. They have permanent missions to the UN with ambassador, who is a permanent representative on ambassador level, and we have consulates. So can you count how many diplomats we have? And each diplomat has a family. And has employees. And many employees within those missions and consulates, they also come from foreign ministries of their countries. So it's a shame that we have doing my homework, I haven't found a lots of focus. So New York City precisely should have more presence of federal government here, especially the intelligence agencies. It's a protection for us as New Yorkers, protection for those decent diplomats and delegates who come here for the right thing, to see the world a better place, and the protection for all Americans.
Absolutely. And we just had the example of Turkish entities influencing Eric Adams' campaign with his straw donors. I believe they were Turkish entities that were involved in assisting his campaign and influencing our elections here. We have the investigation into potential CCP communist agents with Grace Meng and Flushing and whatnot, working within the police departments or connected to meetings with police officials. So the presence of the UN in New York does bring the potential for espionage of other countries. And it's the first time I'm hearing anybody bring attention to it.
So you mentioned very important points. You mentioned the Turkish government. Let me tell the audiences and my viewers that Turkey is much more better and greater than what our current mayor has made people understand. Turkey is a country that has history, economy, it's great in tourism and culture. And those officials, Turkish officials, who, I like the truth, bribed our current mayor, are actually the corrupt officials in Turkish government. By the way, I'm Turkish by integration, not by blood. I lived in Turkey, so Turkey for me is a law. When I worked in peacekeeping, I already raised the Turkish flag with the Turkish police. And I was participating in the medal parade of the Turkish police in the United Nations. And I'm known to the president of Turkey, to many government officials, and I'm known also to the police commissioner of Turkey. So by doing so, by receiving bribes, or you can say influence money, can we say that? Like to make it a little bit like diplomatic?
Sure.
To label it a little bit like...
Wine-dined and pocket-lined.
When we do that, first of all, it's illegal in any country on this planet for a candidate or an official of the government to receive money from a foreign nation or from foreign government. This is one. By doing so, the current mayor has denigrated our country, the United States of America. We don't need bribes from others. When I become a mayor of New York City, I'm proud to be the mayor of New York City. We have money, we have pride, we have honor, we have dignity, we have culture, we have history. Why do I go to beg money from others? In the meantime, he already lowered the level of Turkey. Those decent government officials in Turkey are very ashamed by what has happened. And that consul general who was in charge of the bribery has fled the country. He's not here. And I happen to have met with the Consul General of Turkey who has been bribing our current mayor, Adam. And you can't believe this. When I was running for the position of UN Secretary General, I received, first of all, a support from His Majesty the King of Spain, the King of my motherland, Spain, and I received support from the government of Canada, from the government of New Zealand, and I was planning to get support from Turkey. So I had a meeting with the Consul General of Turkey because I'm known to government officials, I've been known to the consulates, to the permanent mission. However, I stopped going there because of the corruption that has been rising within the Turkish government. And when I met with him, I mentioned to him that I'm very known to the former police commissioner of Turkey. That consul general who bribed our current mayor didn't know who the former police commissioner of Turkey. So this, did you understand what I mean?
Yeah, he's
a consul
detached from his own work.
Exactly. So somebody who is representing his country in New York City doesn't recognize the name of a former police commissioner of the entire country of his that he's representing in America.
Yeah.
So, and this has started way before the construction of the Türk Evi, which is Turkish house. This has started since the time our current mayor was the president of Brooklyn Borough. And I'm gonna leave this. We can have another I would be delighted to be invited again. We can talk about this.
I can tell.
The right person who is behind this bribery and corruption has not been has not been in the light yet. So nobody has mentioned his name yet. And I don't know why, whether somebody is covering up for him or they haven't found him or they haven't done the correct investigation. We can talk about this later.
Sure. There's so many failures in the New York Police Department. Now we have Commissioner Tisch taking over.
Yes.
Many people in the Internal Affairs having resigned.
Great. And then our current mayor is coming from an entity that has been corrupt for decades, at least for the recent half century, NYPD. NYPD is our police department. There is a lot to be done to have NYPD as the finest police. I don't like, I want to see NYPD the finest, but it's not.
No.
Have New Yorkers seen the police of Australia? Have they seen the police of Singapore, the police of Finland, the police of Norway, the police of Denmark?
No comparison?
No comparison. So I'm not criticizing, because when you have something, you have to fix something, correct?
Yeah.
It's good to recognize your mistakes. We have a lot going on wrong. Why we don't just put hand with hand together and correct our mistakes? So we need to reform in the police departments, and now I'm coming to my policy. We need to reform in the in courts, which is judicial reform. We have courts that are packed with Democrat judges. Our constitution doesn't say that we have to be Democrats or Republicans. It's one constitution. My honor and your honor, if we end up in trouble, doesn't say that we have to be Democrats in order to get our rights, or we have to be Republicans. Our law is one, our constitution is one, and our flag is one. Mm-hmm. So when a Republican goes, at least to housing court, where I have been experiencing some hassles, if you are Republican, you have no rights. The judge will not even look at you, most judges. There are very decent judges, very few, in our New York City housing, civil, and Supreme Courts, but they are very few. They could be Democrats, they could be Republicans, I don't know all of them, I'm just doing my homework, but we should at least have, if we have 100 judges in a court, why don't we have like 30 Republicans, 30 Democrats, about 20 independents and 20 conservatives. This way we have a diversity. Mm-hmm. So, and then one thing is happening. It just struck my mind. I am so astonished. We don't appoint judges, we elect them. It doesn't make sense. Where I come from, to become a judge, you have to be either a prophet or an astronaut. Mm-hmm. It means you have to be the best in your family, the best in your community, the best in your entire city, and probably one of the best in your country. Yeah. Because you have to go through lots of training, lots of studies, and even your behavior is so distant. It's like a judge is like a royalty member. Here, when we elect a judge could be a carpenter, could be a lawyer, could be a clerk, could be an engineer, could be a philosopher, could be a teacher, and then they become judges. Mm-hmm. Don't we have that happening in New York City?
I haven't, I do know...
I have been doing my homework.
I do know people in the DA have told me they think the court system is crap, and they're in the system.
From there we can come to when you mentioned the DOJ. Now, talking about whatever bribery scheme is going on in our city, we have to let that investigation finish its path. Nobody should be pardoned for something so huge. So you and I, we are citizens. Say if we work in just a normal company and entity and we receive bribes from somebody, we will be fired, don't we? Aren't we going to be fired?
We will be if we
Definitely.
do that.
And we will be treated badly. And we may lose even our chance to get a job somewhere else. So we have the mayor of our city, the greatest city in the world, who received money from foreign governments, even embracing that government. It's an ally to the United States. Turkey is not anything, it's a big country. Yeah. It's my beloved second home. So then that mayor has to face justice. Not right, but has to go through the process. We have to find out what he has done. We have evidences. We cannot just cover everything. And then I feel so sad that through my homework, I've discovered that we have people who have done nothing, they are in jail. You must have heard this, correct?
I have heard that.
We have
the wrongfully incarcerated.
Lots of injustice, wrongfully incarcerated. That's the term. Thank you for bringing it up. I have to mention that. So we have to reform the judicial system so nobody will be wrongfully incarcerated, and people will know that the justice exists. Mm-hmm. Right now, people sometimes are afraid something can happen to them and they may end up in jail because they can either go without a trial, proper trial, or by somebody tampering with evidence. So we can't live like that. So let's give an example by having somebody who is the head of the city facing charges. Anybody can face charges, correct?
Yeah.
A decent person will say, investigate me. When I was working in the investigations of the United Nations, I had very great boss who left the UN, and because of him, I ended up without a job. It was because I had been retaliated against, because we have been investigating mainly the child sexual exploitation and abuse that is raising important matter in the UN. It's a huge issue in peacekeeping.
Right. Yeah.
And there is a huge cover-up about that. And I don't feel happy. I'm a human being. I don't have children yet, but I have nieces, I have nephews. I am part of the community. I'm a world traveler. I wouldn't feel safe if there are children raped out there. And I don't want to be just sitting, doing nothing about it. So.
I think that's great that we have a candidate who's talking about human rights and
Yes.
how important that is and these topics. We're just going to take a moment and we will be right back speaking with Fátimazöhra Nouinou, and she is a mayoral candidate. The election's coming up next November 2025. Stay tuned and we'll be right back. The Doge t-shirt is here today. Printed on high-quality, 100% soft cotton shirts using non-toxic inks. Available in all sizes. Order yours today. $25 each or 5 for $100. Email info@live1.tv. Again, email info@live1.tv. Specify your sizes and quantity. We are back at live1.tv studios here in New York. The New York mayoral election is upon us. I'm here with candidate Fátimazöhra Nouinou, and we were just having a very exciting conversation on corruption that's everywhere right now and the need to have it changed to make our city better. We also touched on human rights, which is, I think, a great topic to bring into the election. As we wrap up, Fátimazöhra, what would you like to tell our audience? I want you to come back to the studio, hopefully very soon. There's so much to talk about. And before you give us our answer, are you open to debates with the other candidates?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
There's the challenge to them.
Yes.
And tell us, what would you like to tell the audience? Please take the remaining time.
Sure, and this will be the answer to your prior questions,
Yeah.
how I will lead as a mayor.
Sure.
So I've already mentioned part of my policies, which is judicial reform, police reform. I want to mention, and you mentioned human rights, thank you, it's actually my priority. As I said, having the UN here, we receive people who are coming for the dream of human rights in New York City. Right now, everything done in New York City is against human rights.
Yeah.
And there are violations of human rights on every level. We go to the streets, people slip in the streets, it's a violation of their human rights. We shouldn't let people slip in the streets. Homelessness is a big issue, I'm gonna deal with that. Mental health is another major issue, I'm gonna deal with it. Cleanliness. You know that there are in third world countries, cities that they don't have the garbage that we have in New York City.
Yeah.
They're super clean. So it's a shame on us. We have to clean our city. Then we have to improve public spaces, parks. We have lots of bullying. People have already lost their decency. We have lots of hate, jealousy. We shouldn't have that. We are way beyond that. We are the first world. This is one. Other thing, we have to improve the transportation system. MTA, China is our enemy. The trains in China are like you are in another space, another planet. It's like on the space. Those trains that we have, subways, buses, we have to improve them. When I was in peacekeeping, I used to travel from Australia to Singapore. And then sometimes from Singapore, I used to take a bus between Singapore and Malaysia. Oh God, what a bus.
Right.
We should be better than that.
People have become used to it here.
Exactly.
They don't
No,
even expect
we
it
should,
to be better.
We should enforce that. We should enforce public distancing, and then we have to deal with the housing issues. There are many buildings from the First Avenue in front, next to the UN. From the First Avenue, go to the Second Avenue, all the way to the West level, and you can go upstate. You can go to Brooklyn. I have been in all 5 boroughs when I started preparing for my campaign to have a look and take notes. There are buildings locked. Even the window is built. So what is inside and empty? So we have people sleeping on the street, and you walk few steps within the same block, you find like 2 or 3 buildings, they are empty and locked. So where is our government? Where is our money? And I was watching TV once. I heard New York government, I don't know whether it was New York City, New York budget, whether New York City budget or New York State budget. It was just, I was doing something on my computer and then I heard it on TV and then I ran to hear it. They said that the budget of New York, whether city or state, is bigger and greater than the budget of the entire Australia. So where is the money? We have the budget.
Sure.
So we have to deal with congestion, with inflation, with housing, with mental health, with homelessness, and with education. We have to improve education system. We have to have high standards education. And then also universities. We have been seeing university students just protesting in the street. They had no idea what they were doing. Most of them have not even traveled overseas. They haven't even been in the airport. So what do they know about other countries to go angry to the streets and then protest about something they don't know about? So we have to educate our youth. We have to protect our kids. And we have also to advocate for more higher level education and more knowledge in universities.
That sounds great. It sounds like I'm inviting you right now to come back to live1.tv. Thank you. Don't forget to follow and subscribe to our channel. We are one of the few remaining accurate sources for information, especially on the mayoral race here in New York.
Ian, I have
Yes.
something, forgive me.
Certainly.
You mentioned earlier the Chinese government.
Right.
This part of the Chinese government has bought the entire United Nations. I invite my viewers to go to YouTube. When I was campaigning for the Secretary General of the UN position, I have released a video on 5 parts, Truth for Peace. There is lots of information about that.
Okay.
About what's happening with diplomats, that they have been investigated by our government,
Yeah.
and nobody has been incarcerated. One was going to be incarcerated and he died during the process, during the proceedings.
Sure.
So all in those videos. So just go to YouTube and find out Fátimazöhra Nouinou, Truth for Peace. That's a video. It has nothing to do with my current campaign, but at least we will know about that Chinese entity that has been buying the United Nations and has been buying New York City. And I can make like a closing statement. Why? Because our entire New York City government is in Chinatown. What does this mean? I leave it to my viewers.
Okay, thank you so much, Fátimazöhra Nouinou. Thank you, and join us on the next episode at live1.tv from New York.
Thank you, Ian.
You're very welcome. Thank you.